I think that the expectations of industry and academia don't always fully align because they kind of want different things. High-functioning research academics are looking for prestige and promotion. They achieve that through publication. Publication of what some people call curiosity-led research. They're looking for 4-star scores in the ref, all those sorts of things that high-functioning research academics look for. They're also looking for funded research programs that last 3 or 4 years because that allows them to hire very talented postdocs to work with them on 3-year contracts, which is what the postdocs are working for. That's almost the inverse of a standard business model of what industrial clients want when they come for answers to questions. They want, obviously, their question answered, and they want an answer in a short time frame. I'm thinking like 3 to 12 months, usually. And that's what they're looking for. The timescales don't match up. The goals don't always match up. Now, the alignment isn't completely divorced. There are times when alignment is much more close. So, for example, in reasonably short consultancy arrangements, you'll find that an academic tends to be much more receptive to the idea of 5 or 8 or 10 days of consultancy delivered to industrial clients. And industrial clients who can have good questions answered in that time frame, they like that too. They're used to that engagement model. So those are nice sort of deals to put together, but they're small. What the academic would really like is an enormously long project with a high funding base to go after. And in cybersecurity, you don't see a lot of companies who want to invest in that way. They're focused on this year's product line or this year's service, and they want to build on sort of research that's been done very often elsewhere. They'll hire expertise in. Because I think that the things that industry most wants and most needs, these kind of middle ground projects that last, say, 6 or 12 or 18 months, that cost 50, 100, and 150,000 pounds, sort of in that kind of region, that require focus but not very, very lengthy focus. Those can be extremely helpful. They can have huge impact on the industry side. And I think it would be nice to find a way to facilitate more focus on those types of projects. We had a project that's very well known, actually. We can talk about it. We did some work for GSK, specifically on the question of why do people take certain type of risk-taking behavior with their IT systems. We were looking at cases of phishing and things like that. So we had sociologists and social psychologists looking at this, and they're a wonderful case study because they have staff members in many different cultures, because these are often culturally driven values about why do people take risks or not take risks, why do they follow rules or not follow rules. And the outputs of that were very helpful to the client. I mean, they said they were able to immediately action that in terms of like how their risk management program worked. Now, whether or not that has a broader impact on the market, it's a little bit hard to say at the moment. I do know that some of the work done in that engagement has helped to spawn some follow-on engagements being done one client at a time. It's difficult with engagements like that to create publishable collateral, which is what I would like to create most of all. And not just because publishable collateral is a goal of research academics, but because I feel strongly that the more that we can publish sort of defensive cybersecurity know-how and research results, it tends to make for a better playing field for everyone concerned. One of the challenges we have is that there's a lot of things that academics already know, but people outside the academy do not. They're sometimes counterintuitive. I'll give you a great example that came up, and this is from, I'm not a social psychologist, but this came up in that domain as well as others. There is people who write security policies, whether it's an HR policy, an acceptable use policy, or whatever. They try to tell users, do this, don't do that, a series of do's and don'ts. Well, they want to make sure that users do the right thing. So if you're going to build a policy, you also build perhaps a series of HR consequences, job consequences, if you do something wrong. Now, is that going to be a light touch consequence, like, oh, you did a bad thing, now you have to buy the donuts, or is it going to be you're fired? Now, what many security managers don't realize is that there's very strong research evidence, and this is drawn from social psychology and business organizational theory, as well as a couple of other fields, that in many circumstances there is an inverse relationship between the strength of the punishment in a policy and your compliance rate. Now, that very often staggers people. They think, well, wait a minute, if we make the punishment heavier, surely that means people are more likely to comply. And the answer is not always. Not always. So I've spoken to people out in the field where I was told, for example, of one organization that conducts simulated phishing activities, and they're very serious about it. This is not a European organization, by the way, because what I'm about to describe would not be permissible, I think, in Europe. Probably not. They conduct aggressive simulated phishing, and then if a staff member is caught out, they're fired. It's a job-ending thing. And what I said to the person who told me the story, I said, what this organization might not realize is they might actually be creating a more insecure environment by publishing that as their rule. Because strangely, people don't always increase their compliance just because the punishment's greater. It sometimes works the other way around. I think there's a couple things that can be done to try to narrow this gap. One of them is, I think, on the university side, and different universities have experimented with this to some degree. There are some interventions that can happen there. I think one thing that's helpful is establishing a career path for people in cybersecurity, which encourages and celebrates industrial engagement. Some people have referred to that as a practitioner's path, some as a practicing engineer's path, whatever it happens to be. And try to find people who very much want to engage with those types of projects. And they're celebrated for it, they're promoted for it. That's what their career path is about. If you get a certain number of people in there, they can become the glue that binds everything else together. Another intervention that's in the process of working through, and I don't know if anyone knows yet what the impact will be, is here in the UK, is the KEF, the Knowledge Exchange Framework. I mean, it's a new metric that the government's coming out with to measure effectiveness and impact from universities, and it's all supposed to be around measuring how effectively can we get knowledge out of the academy and into the hands of industry. I think that's a move in the right direction. I think many of us are waiting to see exactly how that program is going to work and how things are going to be measured. On the client side, I think there's something very important that the industry partners can do to make this work better. And that is, many people in industry are not especially experienced at buying research or at commissioning research. And as a result, some of them will take their existing procurement procedures, which would be used for buying everything from software to spanners, wrenches, and they attempt to apply it in a university research environment. And there's just a complete mismatch of contracting expectations, a complete mismatch of effectively sort of rational engagement. And it can sometimes be extremely difficult to get a deal together when that happens. So I think that if people in industry could have a slightly more realistic and flexible approach to contracting, I think they could make a lot of gains.